Hi, today I'm going to give a summary about interesting novel that I love. And the name of the novel is The Picture of Dorian Gray. The Picture of Dorian Gray is a moral fantasy novel by Irish writer Oscar Wilde. He is considered one of the London leading playwrights and was a celebrity of his time for his great wit. Today, he is remembered for his short stories, his plays, his only novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray, and also for the tragedy of his imprisonment followed by the early death. This novel has 13 interesting chapters, but before to start with the summary, I have to say that when I start reading this novel or this book in the first chapter, I say, what? Because it has different words that I didn't know. And Oscar Wilde described each scent like maybe the move of the air, the color of the flower, the description of the flowers too. So also the phrases that Oscar Wilde used were kind of poetic. So for me it was so difficult not to understand at first. But after, for that reason, I decided to have to look up the words to be able to understand the context. So now, let's continue with the summary. The story begins in London in a studio of the well-known painter Basil Hallward, who was painting a portrait of young men with extraordinary beauty called Dorian Gray. That day, his friend Lord Henry arrived, and when he saw the picture, he mentioned immediately that painting should be shown. But Basil didn't want to because he felt and he considered that should not share with anyone, no? So in that moment, Basil decided to tell Lord Henry how he met Dorian Gray, and also he mentioned that Dorian Gray was his inspiration. During that conversation, Dorian Gray arrived. And at the first, Basil didn't want to Lord Henry meet him. Why? Because Lord Henry had a difficult and special personality, could make that Dorian Gray see the things differently. And it's exactly what happened. Because Lord Henry told Dorian Gray that his old beauty would not last forever, and that he should make the most living of his life to the fullest. And that part, Dorian Gray was worried because he had no thought about it. Even so, he received the portrait painted by Basil, his friend, and thus is when begin the adventure of Dorian Gray. Lord Henry decided to know about the life of the Dorian Gray from an uncle called Lord Fairmont. And Lord Fairmont, his uncle, told him the story of Dorian Gray. Now, Dorian Gray was an orphan because his mother married with a poor soldier, and his grandfather decided to kill the soldier, and sometime later his mother died. During the story, Dorian became a friend of Lord Henry, and Dorian accompanied Lord Henry to different elegant dinners because Dorian was fascinated with the old thoughts, old ideas that Lord Henry had. In the course of during the story, Dorian meets Sybil Vane. Who is Sybil Vane? Sybil Vane is an actress of not very well known theaters, and Dorian loved how she acted and decided to marry her. They were very much in love, but obviously the civil family did not agree because they have just met, and for that reason the civil's brother promised that if Dorian did anything to her sister, he would look for a hint. Basil, his friend, the painter, if you forget it, was not in agreement with this marriage too. But one day, Basil, with Lord Henry, decided to go to meet Sibyl. Unfortunately, in that moment, Sibyl had a lousy performance, and Dorian was disappointed as he realized that he was in love with her performance, not her. In that moment, they fight, and the next day, Dorian received the news that Sibyl is dead. What happened with her? She committed suicide by drinking a glass with toxic materials. Yes, horrible. That was a surprising moment for Dorian, for him, and he noticed in that moment that his portrait painted by Basil, had a slight smile and have changed. So, and from that moment, he promised that he will only live for pleasure, and his portrait will be the one that reflects his old age and his problems. During the story, Dorian was changing his personality, and he noticed that his portrait keep changing too, and he realized that his wish has come true, and he decided to hide it into the basement. No. The time passed, time goes, and one day Dorian meets again with Basil, his friend, the painter. And Basil asked him several questions about rumors about him. Dorian in that moment decided to take Basil to the basement to see the portrait. Basil in that moment, so surprised. Why? Because it was a horrible portrait. Dorian in the picture was old and also reflects evil. Dorian in that moment decided to kill Basil. Yes, his friend Basil. After this, he looked for a science to dispose of the body. Yes, was terrible. During the story, Sibyl's brother reappears. The name of the brother of Sibyl is James. And obviously he looked for Dorian, no, for him, but he could recognize him. And yes, it's obvious because how was it possible that Dorian was still so young? And James, no, the brother of Sylvie, was so confused, but a lady told him that it was Dorian, and then he started chasing him. Unfortunately, James is accidentally killed by of Dorian friends when they were hunting birds. Terrible. One day, Dorian came to see the portrait again and saw a man totally old and full of blood, and he decided to destroy it. Him with a knife, and immediately he fell to the floor. The police arrived and saw an old man on the floor, and the portrait has a beautiful picture of young Dorian Gray. Yes, and that is the end of the story. It's a summary. I love this novel. I recommend it. Thank you for your attention.